how did you get to this level? Commentating in the UFC has to be an absolute dream. How did you get there?
Yeah, I ask myself the same question every morning, Andrew. Managed to land himself this spot. I'm the first Englishman to talk on a UFC broadcast. What makes him special? Well, it all has to come from results. Without the results, then your star will fall. That's just the sad reality of sports and, 2024. So he's got everything to back it up. But when Khabib managed to do what he does, now you've got Topuria, even Marab. You saw the welcoming he got. It's fascinating stuff, and I want to know more. Obviously, the way that things are shaping up with the UFC of late, we haven't had many of those shows that really work for us here in Europe, and that's a frustration. Believe you me, I'm frustrated by it. I think that Stipe will, win or lose, will disappear into the sunset. I think that the big question is, what does Jones do next?
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, an absolute pleasure today to be joined by UFC commentator Jon Gooden. Big fan of this man, not least because he's also an Arsenal fan, but no bias. What's going on, mate? How you doing?
You started it on the wrong foot, really, haven't you? Because form isn't great right now. But yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm doing really well. Good to speak with you.
So as anyone who loves fight sports and is in broadcasting would want to ask, how did you get to this level? Commentating in the UFC has to be an absolute dream. How did you get there?
Yeah, I ask myself the same question every morning, Andrew. Essentially, the short version is I've been on the mat since I was 7 years old. So martial arts has definitely molded my life. And through combat sports, all the way through, being a youth to a teenager, a little bit of time in between where I was playing fairly decent football at an amateur level. And then I just missed combat sports. So got back into it, the rise of the UFC and mixed martial arts. And eventually my coach put on a show. I took to the microphone, just me and a dictaphone at the Watford Coliseum. And through my process of research, just going out to gyms, jumping on the mat with the fighters, and just really immersing myself in the UK MMA scene, I was getting seen more. And I got the Cage Warriors opportunity, a few more shows like Shock and Awe here in the UK. And then when the UFC were expanding internationally, I think I was probably one of the most active guys. So I got a screenshot, and plus 10 years later, I seem to have kept up, and it kind of impressed enough to hold down a job. Could you believe it?
What's the coolest thing about it for you, what you do?
There are many cool things about it. I guess having the access to your heroes, essentially, because I get to hang out with Hall of Famers. I get to regularly speak to, in a casual setting, guys like Max Holloway and Ilia Topuria, and they afford me their time. And I think a lot of that is down to my job title. I'd like to think, I'm an all right guy and people aren't offended by my company. But yeah, those sorts of things, obviously, as someone who truly loves the sport, are kind of pinch me moments.
What is it like for you deep down as somebody who loves the sport? Do you still have that fan inside you? Is there moments where where it still feels surreal to you?
Surreal. I don't know. I'm really, really good at being present in the moment. So that is only when I'm working in the booth. I'll have like in all other aspects of my life, I'm just like everyone else, where I spend far too much time on my phone. I'm switching between various different tasks, and I'm trying to juggle many different things. But there's something about the complexity of a UFC broadcast, the stakes, and it's going to sound a bit cringy, but honestly, that my dedication to trying to tell the story the best way that I can and be a good vocal for the sport, that I'm so dialed in, it really means a lot to me. So there's not a lot of room for that stuff. So I don't get these sort of oh shit moments, if you will. But every now and then when I attend a UFC event and I've perhaps not got, I'm not on the clock, So I went out to Vegas a couple of times this year and had the privilege of doing that. And I sat there with a beer, for example. But I get a really nice seat in the house. And then I do look around and go, how the hell has a guy from Watford, essentially, managed to land himself this spot? I'm the first Englishman to talk on a UFC broadcast. I'm the only UK-based broadcaster for the UFC. I don't, even me saying that, it's yes, I guess it's a flex, but it doesn't kind of feel real.
Pick up the UK. That's amazing. Fantastic. And I suppose what's a really important piece of advice that you've gotten or that you would give, knowing what you know now, getting to where you've gotten now?
This is timely. My coach gave me a sticker when I walked into the gym the other day, which not everyone will fully appreciate what it meant, but it's a sticker saying, "Don't be a dick." Now, a lot of people that know me and train with me, it's my way of sparring. But actually, behind it was quite a thoughtful gift, because my moniker in all of this has kind of been like, work really hard and don't be a dick, because it catches up with you. I've seen people that are, I think, technically better broadcasters than I am, smarter, probably better looking, all of the things that you might associate with a top level broadcaster. But every now and then I've just seen how they are when the cameras are down and around other people. I'm like, oh, you're pretty difficult to work with, or, you know, I wouldn't want to work with you if you were treating my colleagues that way. So I think it's really important that you behave yourself, you know, don't be a dick. But of course, you have to work really, really hard, be consistently doing so longer than everyone else. And that is how you get to and hopefully sustain a position at the highest level.
So I have to ask, who is the biggest dick in combat sport? No, I'm kidding. I won't make you answer that one. But who's the most interesting person then? Because I interviewed Jorge Masvidal the other day, who always just is so charismatic and will basically answer everything. And it really got me thinking about different people that we interview, right? And just, you must have interacted with him many times. It's always interesting. What do you think about his comeback? Well, I'll ask you that in a minute. Firstly, who is the most interesting person in the sport that you speak to that you might interview?
Oh, that's really difficult to answer. I have a shocking memory, which is another thing that you wouldn't normally associate with like someone who's got kind of journalistic attributes. Okay, well, I mean, this is an easy and maybe obvious thing to say, but Dan Hardy was a very interesting guy. Lots of different strings to his bow, so he's certainly someone that I find really, really interesting. Who else? I mean, I'm going to have to run with that one for now, while my tiny mind starts thinking in the background. Who else is pretty interesting? There are so many wonderful stories. Ilia Topuria is probably quite high on my list right now, and someone that I want to get to know a little bit better, to understand why he's resonating so hard, so very quickly, if you will, with his kind of ascent compared to some of his peers. So there's a couple for you.
Dan Hardy, like a beautiful mind for mixed martial arts, really, isn't he? Just absolute student of the game. Yeah. Topuria, then, from what you know of him, because I'm a big advocate of stars. This sport needs stars. Every sport does. And he seems to have everything. Can you give us your take on him and what makes him special and how important he is for the game right now?
What makes him special? Well, it all has to come from results. Without the results, then your star will fall. That's just the sad reality of sports and, 2024. So he's got everything to back it up. And he definitely has the confidence, which would suggest he has the skills, right? So we're drawn to people like that. We want to be around them. We want to feel a little bit of that rub. Because when I was talking to him in the lead up to Max Holloway, going, this guy's a legend and no one's knocked him out before. 5-round guy and gets better as the rounds go deeper. And he's kind of looking at me like, yeah, but he's never faced me. I'm like, there is a certain amount of confidence there. I'm not saying it's false, but every now and then you'll speak with an athlete, and I don't think I'm unfair in saying this or coming to this kind of conclusion where they're saying the words, but I'm not sure they even believe it, but they feel like they've got to say the words. That wasn't the case for Topuria. I think he's authentically himself, although I don't, again, as I was saying before, I don't know enough about him and his background. I don't understand the languages that he speaks to really dive into it. But he's got a really interesting story of hardship and how he's emerged from there. He ties into a lot of different nations, of course, Georgia and Germany, that people forget because I think he was born there. So he spent some early years there. Obviously, Spain, spent some time in the US training at MMA Masters. So there's a lot of different bits that have plugged in. You know, he's a family man as well. And he has a beautiful wife and he's got gorgeous children. And his circle just seems so connected to him. Really strong support system. Now we've also seen that wonderful home that he's created, and DC was challenging him. How have you managed to get this multi-million-pound home on, you know, new champion wages, if you will? So there's a lot of things there that he's spinning in the background that are giving him some of these riches, and he just wears it well. He wears it well. It's an obvious comparison. You know, we've seen Conor McGregor do great things, but he's different. We see many people in different markets do things a little differently. And I think you and I, probably being outside of North America, we look for those individuals because we kind of think that the Sean O'Malley's are always going to hit the ground running because they just got this big nation behind them. But when Khabib manages to do what he does, now you've got Topuria, even Merab, you saw the welcoming he got. It's fascinating stuff, and I want to know more.
How was 308 for you in Abu Dhabi? It's secondary fight capital of the world now. What was your overall take on the event?
Big. It's kind of difficult to ask a commentator, particularly like a play-by-play or someone doing the reporter role, to speak to the magnitude because we essentially sit in the hotel room studying. So we don't always get our boots outside of the hotel to really take in the atmosphere. But I was obviously there on the night, and it had a big fight feel. It really is wonderful over there in Abu Dhabi in terms of the way they put on the show. The hotel lobby was crazy every day. All the security were there because we just had crowds gathering, and outside the fronts, every supercar you could imagine was running through on a daily basis, and people with their entourage. I don't know who a lot of these people were, but they are seemingly important or have great wealth. And I just find that kind of interesting. And it's nice to see that they pay homage to our fighters and the other important people within the UFC machine and mixed martial arts, by the way, as well. So that was different to what I see when I'm on the road typically. And of course, you know, the main card, the pay-per-view card, just hit all of the notes. We got to really find out who was coming through, who really was that good, and perhaps those others we're now starting to see where they are in their respective careers. So a lot of questions were answered, and I think it's going to set up 2025 really nicely, that event in particular.
How iconic is Ilia's win over Max? Did you feel like you're witnessing a piece of history? How's that going to be looked back on? Yeah,
a defining moment in his career, 100%. When you do things that others haven't against an absolute legend, future Hall of Famer, super popular, elite, skilled guy like Max Holloway, there's nothing more to answer for, right? There are certain people that you, I think, have to beat in order to be regarded as a great within that division and on the track. And it is Robert Whittaker at middleweight, and it is Max Holloway at 145 pounds. And we saw that accomplished in the same night. So Ilia Topuria, big win, statement, a knockout as well, not done before, with the confidence, with all of the talk beforehand, but then the grace and the respect afterwards. We're understanding him a little bit more, and we're certainly celebrating his skill set. Just a showcase for Topuria and his team.
There's been a bit of criticism about the UFC 304 timing, starting late. What's your opinion about these card timings? I know the fans love to go in.
There are things that we as fans don't always understand that go on. They are complicated machines, the UFC and ESPN. And broadcast deals, as much as we all have someone that we answer to, I guess, and I'm reading between the lines here, but ESPN have a certain schedule to fill. They have certain timings. They have data that say, if we're going to put this on, it's not going to do the amount of buys that we need. So we need to fill this space. And when certain events hit certain spots on the calendar, it's just how it is. Super frustrating for the local markets. You know, I'm out there banging the drum and have been for 15 years about this sport. And I truly stand by, we need to have shoulder programming. We need to have regular events on at convenient times for people to think that this is happening down the road from them. And it's worth their investment of time because they might run into these stars. And it's not just a sport that is taking place across the world at a very inconvenient time. Now, obviously, the way that things are shaping up with the UFC of late, we haven't had many of those shows that really work for us here in Europe. And that's a frustration. And believe you me, I'm frustrated by it. I would love to go to work on a more convenient time, as much as I do enjoy traveling the world. It's a first world problem. I'm very lucky boy. But for the betterment of the sport, we need to have these events over here in Europe on our time, showcasing our talent, not only our best talent, but our prospect talent as well. And I just would like to see more of it in 2025 and going forward.
You touched on it already with Topuria. I mean, we've seen McGregor, Paddy Pimblett come through. Is there anybody you would like to, if you were sending a direct message to Dana in terms of talent in Europe that we should keep an eye on that are going to go big?
Guys that are going to go big in Europe. We're in a really strong spot. I mean, Paul Hughes, I know that the UFC didn't sign him. I think that he's going to be a big star. I think keep an eye on France. I think they're going to be just a machine for churning out new talent. And yeah, I think that's going to be a really strong market. In the UK, guys like Oban Elliott, I think, you know, he's got a big fight coming up and he's getting the kind of platform for it as well. I'm interested to see how his stock rises. We've got a lot, you know, even and these are folk outside of the UFC, but Dakota Ditcheva, I'm sorry if I've pronounced her surname wrong, but I've been following her career for a long time. She seems like a star. And I'm sure that the two fighters that I mentioned that aren't currently with the UFC would like to test themselves against the very best in the world. So I'd like to see that down the line. There's just a couple for you. But yeah, I think the UFC are doing a good job of building those that we've got. We just, it's time for them to break out and have some performances. So we've got a few that are, there's a bit of a gap at the moment, I feel like, particularly in the UK. We've got our Arnold Allens, the Roan Murphys, Tom Aspinall. I'm going to miss some out here. I'm just trying to reel off a few. Your Jack Shaws, Molly McCann's, Paddy Pimblett. And then there's a little bit of a gap where we've got guys on the come up like Oban, Sam Patterson, Nathaniel Wood, Modestus. There's just that gap, you know, and we need the rankings. Those guys need that ranking. So they're on their way. And when they do, we're going to start to see how they take to the spotlight. And I'm excited to see what the reaction's like.
You mentioned Aspinall there. Can you look into your crystal ball a little bit? What's going to happen at heavyweight, or what do you want to happen? Is it going to be farewell to Jones and Miocic on the biggest platform? And then in which case, who can step into that void? What do you see at the top of that division over the next 6 months?
I see new blood coming through. The Contender Series this season had a couple of heavyweights, some interesting characters, not ready for the likes of Aspinall by any stretch. I'm not sure that anyone is quite ready for Tom Aspinall. Of course, John Jones and Stipe Miocic are. But outside of that, Ciryl Gane, for me, got a huge rematch coming up with Volkov. who is in great form, and I'd love to see it. Wonderful guy, and we get to see his personality a little bit more now, the big Russian. But Ciryl Gane is someone who I've kind of put my pounds into his stock for a while, and I've always thought that there'd be a showdown with him and Tom Aspinall down the line, and I still think that's in the future and could be in 2025 if results go right for both men. I don't know how it's going to shake out, really. It is. They are some of the biggest questions in mixed martial arts right now. What happens with Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic? I think that Stipe will, win or lose, will disappear into the sunset. I think that the big question is, what does Jones do next? And he's unpredictable. I would obviously like for Tom to have that mega fight with Jones. I think that Jones would earn a very big payday. I think his ego is, is achieved such a lot. And he too has this air of invincibility about him. And if the right buttons are pushed at the right time and everything comes together in the most wonderful way, then maybe he and Tom can get it on a huge show, maybe in the spring. That would be best case scenario. Otherwise, Tom's got to wait around to see what happens next. And I dare say, I reckon it will probably be the winner of Volkov. Well, I think if Gane wins that fight, then we might see a big fight again in the spring or late winter where Aspinall can fight Ciryl Gane. Let's see what happens there.
As a lover of the sport, if you could match make one fight for 2025, what would it be?
It's got to be Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones. That is the fight as a Brit that I think the fans would like to see most. As an MMA guy, international, commentator, that still stands true. So I think that's the one that leaps off the page for me.
I asked you a bit earlier about Jorge Masvidal. I wanted to ask you, because we've got Cowboy coming back. Dana doesn't seem to be too much of a fan of it. Where do you see those guys fitting into the scenario? Is there a Rocky story to be had? What would you like to see go down with those two?
I don't know. Honestly, they've done so much for the sport, given us so many incredible memories. And they've been away, and the sport does move along at a fair old pace. I mean, if they're going to come back, then it's got to be like a super fight with a fellow veteran, and those two names can definitely go in the hat together. I just don't know whether the UFC will do that. It's a lot of resources to make something like that happen, and I don't really know how I feel about Cowboy coming out and saying that he's gone away and he's like over, he's gone through the TRT thing and he's built his body back up and he's taken all the peptides and he's all fixed and healed, and now he comes back. Is it for a last hurrah? Is it to make a run? I don't know what message that necessarily sends out. But I think we're trying to build for the future here, and the UFC has always been the kind of league of champions and for the elites, and those guys have done so much. And I don't know. Is this the place for it? It's not a decision that I have to take, thankfully. So let's see what the boss man thinks. I'll watch it. Of course I will. And I love those guys dearly. But I love them, I think, for the service to the sport that they've given us. And I think that your legacies start getting hurt, and God forbid they get hurt as well, because tough fights, not coming out of that one. Neither of them are coming out of that one unscathed.
We've still got Nick Diaz knocking around. How do you feel about him facing Vicente Luque?
Yeah, well, Nick still feels like he's got an itch to scratch. He hasn't been as active, so that there is a difference there. And huge cult following. Luque wants that fight. Yeah, so there's a lot of noise surrounding that. And I actually was speaking to him in Manchester because he was over cornering there. So give him that opportunity. Give Nick Diaz the opportunity to earn some good corn as well in 2024. He hasn't had the paydays that some of the others have with his kind of notoriety. The money just is growing all the time in our sport, very young sport, on the way up. We only have to go back 10 years and understand how much some of these guys are getting paid in some of these big fights. And it wasn't a lot compared to what they could now. So I'm pleased that he's going to hopefully earn a decent payday out of it. And yeah, let's see what he looks like. But it might be the last one, the last time we get to enjoy him in the octagon.
I feel like it's a little bit of an end of an era with so many people we grew up with maybe having their last dance. So if you had one word to describe your fellow commentary broadcasting team, what would it be, starting with John Anik?
GOAT.
Daniel Cormier.
Superstar.
Joe Rogan.
Legend.
Michael Bisping.
Mr. UK.
Hell yeah. Paul Felder.
Smooth.
Very nice. Dominic Cruz.
Technical.
Megan O'Leary.
Quote.
Very nice. And Laura Sanko.
Trailblazer.
All right. Pressure's off for this last one. This should be slightly easier. Rank the top 5 best fighters in the UK.
Oh my God, are you kidding me? I'm ranking people on top what now? Currently?
Yeah.
The top 5 best fighters in the UK currently.
UK and Ireland.
Oh no! Let's just go UK. Let's just go UK.
All right.
Right. Let's go with. We're gonna have to put Aspinall number 1, and we have to put Leon number 2. That was hard because I feel like I'm, kicking a man who's down in a way. So there we go. Then we got to go Lerone Murphy. Then we've got to go Arnold Allen. Big fights. Am I missing anyone out here when I say this? It's really difficult, but MVP. It's really difficult, that one. Really difficult. Because certainly with MVP, he's been in big spots on big cards, and maybe a couple of the others that I'm considering that are just outside. I haven't seen them underneath the brightest of lights yet. But skill for skill, they might pip him to the post, but we shall see. It could be, I mean, Paddy MVP, either or.
It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, mate. I really appreciate it. Keep smashing it. Keep up the good work, and up the gun.
Let's go. Come on, you Gunners.
Yes.